This is Demiworld.
Oh my God! How have you been?
I'm all right. Next week is the last week of work, really, mostly. Because I tell people it's hard when it gets, I think for everyone at the end of spring semester, because everyone's over it. Like, it's been a long academic year, and the professors are tired, and the students are tired, and the administrators are tired.
And it's beautiful outside. You know, it's finally nice outside. It's been cold.
And I'm tired, and I always feel like when I get to this point, I seem like I hate my job because I'm a little burnt out. But I always tell people, I'm always like, I know it seems like I'm not at all interested in what I do for a living, but I love my job. You just can't tell right now because I'm really tired and I'm like pretty burnt out. So that's sort of how I'm feeling about today too, about recording this podcast. I'm like, I don't even know what we're calling today's episode.
Oh, yeah. I think it was our favorite crimes, right?
I know. And it's going to sound like I hate it, you know, because I just don't. I was laughing about it earlier. It's like it's supposed to be our favorite crime, but I'm going to sound so disinterested in what I'm talking about. You're going to think that I hate it because I'm just so tired right now. That's how it is for me across the board. This is the worst time of a year if you work like on an academic calendar. This is the worst.
So I wanted to talk with you about the joke aspect of the cast.
Okay.
Nobody's really going to the website, so I'm thinking that they might not even know what the joke means, or it's just kind of this weird jarring thing that happens at the beginning.
Okay.
So I don't know if we should maybe not do it anymore and just kind of have a little conversation, introduce the podcast ourselves, and then just start. I don't know if that would be better.
Okay. I mean, we can try it and see what happens.
People seem to be listening to it.
I mean, not many people, but yeah. I mean, hey,
yeah, I mean,
it's
new still.
Yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
Yeah. We're starting from ground zero here. So from ground zero, we're doing pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, I have nothing to compare it to, but.
Yeah, I mean, I look at other podcasts that have more content on the same place where we upload to, and they're just about as many views, or they're like less views than ours, and they've been up longer. So I'm like, oh, okay, maybe we're doing pretty good.
Okay.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up, I think it was the Club Crimes one, that there is a large portion of that, like maybe 10 minutes, where I'm completely silent. And that is because my audio didn't record anything and I didn't know it. So we had to re-record the beginning of that. And it was brought to my attention by my husband. He's like, next time just say that that's what happened so people will know, because it sounds weird. And I was like, oh, okay, good to know. Good to know.
Okay, right. I guess we can just speak about what is going on.
Yes, we can. We can just talk about it.
Right.
You don't have to hide. It's okay.
Right.
Shit happens.
Right.
So for anybody listening, hi, welcome. This is Demiworld.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm Cindy. And that was the other thing. Just one more little thing. I was reading that it's good to have a podcast trailer. So we can think about recording a podcast trailer for the series, and then when we get closer to releasing season 2, so people will know what they want to, what the podcast is about, because our theme will be changing each season, as opposed to like their serialized podcasts where they tell a whole story.
And no one probably knows that. I mean, have we?
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus Christ.
No,
you know,
I know.
Guess what?
I know.
Thank you, our 11 loyal listeners. I am like, I have been in therapy steadily for the last 5 or 6 years to work on my communication skills and unblocking my throat chakra. So as time goes on, Cindy and I will just try to communicate what we are doing. It's hard.
We don't talk in my family. We just don't talk in my family.
Yeah,
Cindy
we're passive aggressive. Poor communicators, but we're really working on it. So just hang in there, you know.
I'm either I just don't say anything to you, or I don't have any filter and I tell you exactly how I feel. So
Yeah, I mean,
you don't know what you're going to get with me.
But if it's
Yeah.
like, if I have to address anything directly, then I definitely will not. I don't know why. I get so weird about that stuff.
So we're going to release a trailer soon. We're going to record a trailer soon that talks about who we are, why we're doing this podcast, and what the podcast is about.
Now that we're like almost
now
done.
that we're all done of the format of the
season.
podcast. Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Whoops.
And then
it never even occurred to me till just now that we should talk about what we're doing. I don't.
Yeah. What does Demiworld even mean? Like what?
Why did? Yeah.
What is?
Wow.
Why did we choose the name of Demiworld? Like.
If you want any information out of me and Cindy, it's not happening.
The mystery shall stay a mystery.
Yeah, we just don't talk about things, apparently.
Yeah, and also you can go to the website, which is demiworld.net, and we have notes up for each show. We've got blog posts. We have a really great cold case murder map where you can go and look at the agencies who are, that cover cold cases. So in your area, we have just basically California right now. We want to add more of the continental United States and other countries to that as well. Australia and New Zealand have really great cold case online resources, and we want to add those to the map too. So if you're listening to this and you're into cold cases, check out the website and see if there's anything that you could add, and we will add it, and we will give you props on the cast and on the website for helping us out, make the crime map more complete. Our website's pretty cool. You should go check it out.
I was checking it out earlier.
Uh-huh.
I like it. I like your blog that you got going on.
Oh, thank you.
I did.
I put your notes up there too.
I noticed. And I'm whatever. This is so hard for me to communicate, and it's not even anything. A couple times I noticed the angel's name is Angle.
Oh, shit. I hate that. Okay, thank you. All right,
That's not a
I'll fix
criticism.
that.
I'm just letting you know. Wow.
Gel,
Look at me,
Angel.
Look at me speaking and communicating.
Oh, Kelly.
Therapy.
It's like that time you kept the
Therapy.
secret about the stripper.
I know.
So good. So good. One day we'll tell that story.
One day.
See, one day it'll be an outtake. We'll tell the story about the stripper.
Right.
That's a good one.
We can even put a picture up too.
We can put a lot of pictures.
No. We'll just do one or two.
Well, what are we talking about today? We're talking about favorite crimes.
It is, and we've actually talked about this one already, but I think that I was having some major sound issues.
Well, the problem too was that I didn't have my headphones on, so we had to re-record my portion twice. So actually, this is the third time we've recorded this.
It is true, yeah, and I don't know, one of the times I thought that sitting in the middle of my bed and propping my microphone up on a box of Snyder's sourdough pretzels was an effective way to record anything, and it wasn't. So this is our third time recording. No wonder I don't sound excited about wanting to do this one again. We've already done it 3 times. Or
I know.
Twice.
Twice. But third time's a charm.
Right.
And in any time if you feel deja vu, now you know why.
Right.
And the last one, I went first. And we can totally keep that the same way unless you want to tell your story first.
I don't have a preference.
All right, I'll go ahead and start then.
Okay.
So I have a penchant. Is that the right word? I'm just going to say I have this real like of heists. I like heists. I like heist movies. I like books about heists. I think a good heist story is very compelling.
That is the correct word.
Thank you.
Penchant.
And this heist story is one of those ones you're just like, ooh, exciting. Somebody got away with stealing a bunch of money. Ooh. And I know it's bad. Stealing's not good. But when it's from a large corporation, it kind of feels victimless sometimes. And you feel kind of like it's an exciting sort of thing. And this is one of my favorite heist stories, and it's called the 3 million yen affair. So on the morning of December 10th in 1968, Tokyo, Japan, 4 Kokobunji branch employees from the Nihon Shitaku Ginko Bank were transporting 3 million yen, which was roughly $818,000 in 1968's money, which is now 3.6 million, in the trunk of their company car. So the money was stowed in locked metal boxes in the trunk, and it contained the year-end bonuses for employees at a Toshiba-owned factory. So they were driving, and they get about 200 meters, which is roughly 2 football fields from the Toshiba factory, when a motorcycle cop pulls them over and frantically tells them that their car has been rigged with explosives and they need to get the fuck out of it as soon as possible. He orders them out of the car, which they totally comply, because why wouldn't you? You don't want to get blown up. And they run to kind of up on an embankment, which is also near this prison. And the cop shimmies underneath the car, which immediately begins to smoke, and they see flames. And he starts screaming, "It's dynamite! It's gonna blow! Run!" So of course they hightail it and get the hell out of there. So the cop calmly gets into the car and drives away with it. And the employees believed that the officer was a real officer because they didn't have any reason to not to believe them. It's 1968. It was a more innocent time. And in Japan, there's a real emphasis on conformity and listening to authority. So there's no reason why they shouldn't have listened to this person. It didn't occur to them that he was traveling alone, and there wasn't a bomb squad. There wasn't a big convoy of police cars trying to make sure that there was no explosion. There was no evacuation of the prison, nothing. None of this occurred to them. And it also seemed like it was on par with what had been going on back at the bank, because their bank manager had been receiving threatening notes. And, that's also one other important thing. The cop says to them that the manager's house has just been damaged by a bomb, and that they have reason to believe the car has been bombed too. So he seemed to know what had been happening at the bank, probably because he'd been sending the threatening notes. The car is found a couple miles away, abandoned. The locked boxes are obviously gone. Another car is found in a similar, kind of, I guess, they traced the cars, another car which had been stolen. No lockbox, but they have reason to believe that they had been in the back for whatever reason nobody ever mentioned. But then the money is never recovered. 5 decades after this crime has occurred, this is their Robin Hood story. It's made it into books, movies, TV dramas, and even a comic book series. The Japanese people love this story. And with good reason. It's a good story. It's just the simplicity of how he steals the car and the money is just, it's kind of brilliant. No one got hurt. Everything kind of just flowed. So the cops find a couple of suspects. The investigation ran upward of $12 million. This is 1968 money, and involved hundreds of detectives, 2 of which died from exhaustion.
And how much money was stolen? How much or valuable was stolen total?
It was 3 million yen, which was $818,000 in U.S. cash in 1968. So $12 million, 1968 money, was spent on trying to solve the crime.
For something that was less than $1 million.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the police liked this 19-year-old guy for the crime, whose dad was an actual motorcycle cop. And shortly after being questioned by the police, his father gives him a cyanide capsule, and the kid kills himself, I guess, to keep honor in the family. But his father, insists that his son was innocent, and the police never find any connection with the money and these guys at all. And then about a year later, the police arrest a 24-year-old man working at a Canadian government office in Tokyo because he resembled the composite photograph that was assembled by the witnesses, bank employees. And he was also a really good driver, because I guess you have to be a really good driver to be able to go from motorcycle to car. I don't know the reasoning behind that.
Right.
There's no, whatever. But he had an alibi and it checked out. And the arresting investigator actually brought the guy in on false charges. So he was fired as a result of that. And I want to take a little side note here and talk about composite photographs, because I had never heard of a composite photograph before reading this case. I've only heard of composite sketches, or like, you see people in detective shows where they have a bunch of eyeballs, like little strips, and they're all like eyes, and then you have noses, and you have mouths and chins, and then hairlines, and you can mix and match, kind of like a kid's game,
right.
and you can kind of come up with a composite of what the person might have looked like. But that's basically how they do a photograph, but it looks like a person. And they're finding now that when you use composite photographs, they're less effective in bringing in suspects, because when you look at a photograph, you think you're looking at a picture of the person, and there's no wiggle room for interpretation. Your brain just goes, oh, that's what the person looks like. I don't know that person. But with a sketch, you're like, because some sketches are really like do not look like people. You're like, I don't know anybody's eyes are that close together. You look at some of these composite sketches and you're like, that's a boogeyman. Kind of looks like my cousin Jeff, maybe. But so they're not as effective as composite sketches in bringing in people, because you can use your imagination more with a sketch than with a photograph. And I don't know, maybe the cops in 1968 should have used a composite sketch instead of a photograph. I don't know if they would have gotten, more help from the general public that way. So in 1978, which is 10 years later, the police bring in a friend of the initial 19-year-old suspect that killed himself in relationship to the robbery. And I guess he'd been flashing around a lot of money, and they thought, oh, this is it. We finally got the guy. But they couldn't hold him on anything. They couldn't charge him with anything. They couldn't prove the money was from the robbery, so they had to let him go. And the statute of limitations runs out, and that's it. You can't do anything. So if anybody had stolen the money, they could totally come out and be like, we stole the money, and they can't do anything to them because the statute of limitations is run out. It remains, like I said before, it remains unsolved. I have no idea who did it, and it was the largest heist in Japanese history at the time.
Yeah, but then they spent 12 times as much money was stolen to investigate it. That's what's like the crime.
I think they just, they really didn't want anybody to get, it kind of made them look foolish, the police, because a guy was impersonating a police officer on a stolen Yamaha bike that's painted white. Like, it made the cops look foolish.
But now they look even more foolish.
More foolish, unfortunately.
All that money.
Yeah,
and, like,
in retrospect.
And not actually solving the crime.
Yeah, I think they probably thought they were going to be able to solve it really easily, but all somebody has to do is just hide out and not spend the money. You don't spend the money for a while. You play it cool.
Right.
You play it cool and you don't spend the money. You don't go out and buy flashy cars and stuff, or you just leave. There's no reason to think that you can't get on a train and put the lockboxes. It's cash. It's not coin. It's not going to be super heavy. You just put it at the bottom of your, you just put the cash, you line it into a lining of a suitcase or something, hop a train, leave the area, take a plane somewhere else. 68. No one's checking, like,
yeah,
nobody's
I'm
doing
gonna
anything.
say that whoever did this heist didn't end their plan at just taking the money out of the car. I'm sure that they followed it through all the way to the end. They knew what they were going to do.
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, the simplicity of how they stole the money, they had to have known where the car was going to be, where it was going, who would be driving it. Like, they had to know all this stuff. So a lot of people thought it was an inside job, but nobody could connect anybody working at the bank with the robbery.
Back then it would be easy to want to think it was an inside job because this stuff wasn't happening a lot, and it's stuff like this that changes the laws in the future going forward. I mean, it's like
that's why you have armored cars now instead of putting
right,
$3 million yen in the trunk of a car. It's like, who does that? It's like, it's a different time. Like people were more, not, I wouldn't say naive, they're more innocent, more trusting. And that this police officer, this robber took advantage of that.
So, my ex-husband's sister rear-ended a armored car once, and
By accident.
by accident. Yeah, I mean, she was such
Her foot slipped or something.
yeah, where she's at like a stoplight. She's like that. If you knew her, she's like one of the biggest stoners I've ever met in my life. And so, like, she was at a stoplight and foot just kind of, she forgot her foot was on the brake, I guess. Whatever. She just hit the back of the car. But like there's a guy in the back, and like they open the little gun
Little door, a little hatch or something.
It's like the little circle they have in the back for just the rifle, like the barrel of a gun to come out. And so she hit the back of an armored car, and a gun came out of the back of the armored car.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a tactic to rob somebody, right? Lock them
exactly.
in so they can't leave.
So she just like, just put her hands up. Like, it's crazy. Like she,
Oh, I would have to. I'm like, oh shit,
rear-ended an
what
armored
just
car,
happened?
and a gun got pulled out on her. That's what
Here's my
happens.
registration and my insurance. I swear I'm insured. Please put the gun away.
Yeah, whoops.
So, this heist reminds me a lot of the robbery at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum that happened in 1990. So, in 1990, there are two security guards at the Isabella Gardner Museum, and it's after hours, and they get a knock at the door, and it's two police officers. And they said they were investigating a disturbance in the area, and breaking protocol, one of the officers lets them in, and they immediately handcuff the two security guards, take them down into the basement where they basically like tie them up. And then they proceed over the next, I think it's like 81 minutes, to steal $500 million in art. They steal 5 Degas, 3 Rembrandts, one of which was his only known landscape, a Manet, a Vermeer, and an Eagle Finale, which was an exact copy of the eagles that were on top of Napoleon's army's flagpoles. And then a Gu, or the Gu, I'm not sure, Gu, which is a Chinese like vase sculpture from the 12th century. And the Gardner Museum didn't have video cameras, but it had motion sensors. So you can watch where they moved around in the building via the motion sensors. And they just cut the paintings out of their frames. They didn't remove the frames. This way they could roll them up and put them into canisters. And they took like 3 trips to their car to load all the goods up in it. And they left. At 2:45 in the morning, 2:45 a.m., 81 minutes after they got there, they drove off with all of this art, and it has never been recovered. And the 2 security guards remained handcuffed in the basement until 8:15 in the morning when other workers showed up. My problem with the Gardner Museum is the motivation isn't as easy to see because it's priceless art. Like, how the fuck are you going to sell priceless art? Where the 3 million yen affair is obvious. Money. It's cold hard cash, unmarked bills, perfect for spending. But why steal art you can't sell? Like, what's the point of that? So I did some research, and it's also for monetary gain. Each person who steals a piece of art thinks they're the ones that are going to be smart enough to actually sell that piece of art. It's really easy to steal something. It's much harder to fence it, especially when the entire art world knows it's stolen. Each one of these guys is just like, oh, I'm the one that's going to be the savviest business person to be able to unload this art. You all, other people who've done this before me, are stupid. You couldn't possibly have done it. I'm the smartest one. So basically, it's just a douchebag who thinks that they're smarter than everybody else who steals art. Because then it ends up being in your basement forever because you can't display it. Can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive just because I'm not exactly always a big fan of museums, I mean, can we be assured that all of the pieces of art that were stolen from the museum were obtained legally from the museum in the first place? Like, what's the history of that artwork? Like, I'm I tend
yeah,
to
I
think
mean,
museums are a little bit of bullshit.
well, it depends. Like if it's a modern art museum, a little less so than one that's got historic artifacts in it. Like the 12th century Chinese vase might have been inappropriately obtained unless it was there on a tour from the Chinese government or whatever, like loaned it out to them, which does happen on occasion where people share art. They go traveling around.
Yeah, but I do think too, like the two world wars have had like a big part
Yes.
in the
Yes.
distribution, the diaspora of it's probably not the right word of
I
art.
like it. It's a good word.
I know, but I doesn't it.
I don't know if you're using it right though.
It might just be that might just be a very specific word that I'm using very wrong. But whatever, the dissemination of artwork through means that are not really ethical or moral these days, or just, however war goes down. But I would say like a lot of acquisition of artwork is questionable.
Well, yeah, especially if, like what you were saying with the wars, like Nazis commandeered a lot of stuff. So it's possible that some of this stuff, like I don't know the provenance of it. It is possible that it was all obtained just perfectly on the up and up. But you never know, because if you can't find the provenance for something, but it's a Rembrandt and you don't know who owned it before that, it's questionable. It's questionable that you don't know where it came from. Like, did a private family own this and it was stolen from them? And like a lot of the people who do come forward and say, hey, I've got photographs of that hanging in my grandparents' house back before World War II and, in Poland, isn't enough to prove that it belongs to you. You have to have paperwork. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have paperwork because they fucking fled for their lives during the occupation.
Yeah, I mean, how convenient is it that you're going to require that someone produces paperwork? Be like, oh, gee, when we went through the whole Holocaust thing, we just didn't hang on to that paperwork.
Yeah, whoops. I had to keep swallowing my diamond ring so it wouldn't get stolen from me. But I still have the paperwork for the Vermeer.
Right, exactly. I mean,
No.
give me a break. Like that, all that does is benefit the person who is in current possession of the artwork.
Exactly. And I know that a lot of institutions that do have this type of art, and there are claims that come forward, they do their best to give it back. Now, the British Museum is different. I think we probably talked about this before. Here's the deja vu. Here it is. We talked about this the last time we did this podcast that we didn't record. The British Museum is horrible.
Well, I got on my soapbox about like any history museum, any artifact museum is nothing but an extension of colonialism.
Absolutely. I remember we talked about there's it's a Dutch museum. So Dutch were awful in Africa. They did horrible things.
Not just the Dutch. Anyone who colonized Africa did horrible things.
Anybody who colonized Africa did horrible things.
But I believe the Dutch ended up with the Congo. Is that correct?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, they did. And they have museums in the homeland with a bunch of stolen artifacts from African tribes that they will not repatriate because they think they can take better care of it than the people who created it.
Yeah, colonialism.
Which is basically just racism. Just like, here's your racism. Hope you enjoy your day.
That's what colonialism is.
It is. Yeah. It's totally, yeah.
And, people who do, like, missionary work for religion purposes are also doing nothing but perpetuating colonialism. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Yep. No, I totally agree with you. Like, oh, let's go save all the brown people.
Oh, the savages. They just don't know.
I'm so worldly by trying to save everyone.
Yeah, we're not looking down on them. They just don't know. We're just showing them the way. We're so nice.
Ignorant. They're just ignorant.
And we're benevolent white people. That's what we are. No. We'll take care of your artwork for you. You couldn't possibly manage a big job like that.
Oh, don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
you'll leave the heavy lifting to us white folks.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so. So yeah, never solved. Still all that missing artist still gone. And
good.
The
That's
Gardner
all I
Museum,
got to say about that is good, because they probably didn't come about it, and they may like have come about it in ways that are currently still legal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that came about ways that they should have.
Well, you can go to the website. They have I got actually all of the information about the heist from the Gardner Museum website, and they talk in depth about each piece. I don't got that kind of time, so I didn't read about each one to know how they got it, but I think they might have the provenance up on, because they had a lot of information about each piece that was stolen.
Right, but it doesn't mean that like everything they
No,
have
I
in their
know.
possession
But
is,
things might have been like, it might have been a family piece that was donated to them.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that kind of thing. So, I mean, I don't know how they acquired their art,
Right.
but
and I
yeah,
don't
who
either.
knows? It's probably in some mobster's basement, moldering, which is also sad on another level, because you can't do anything with it.
Right.
All right, so tell me about your favorite crime.
Yeah, I mean, favorite, I'm going to use that word loosely.
Yeah, I know. Crimes are crimes. They're not good.
Well, no, I just mean because this is like the third time we've done it, and I'm tired, and I no longer care. But I do. Mine's sort of revolves around a heist. So on March 20th, 1976, the heiress to the Hearst publication fortune, Patricia Hearst, was convicted of bank robbery with a firearm, and she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She serves almost 2 years until President Jimmy Carter commutes her sentence, which basically means he reduced it to time served. And then President Clinton, in about 99, 2000, pardons her of the crime completely.
Okay.
So Patricia Hearst, or also known as Patty Hearst, like I said, was an heiress. And she had actually spent 19 months prior to her conviction of the bank robbery as a kidnap hostage of the SLA, or what's known as the Symbionese Liberation Army.
Was Symbionese something that they made up, or is it an actual word?
No, it's something that they made up. It
Okay.
comes from the word symbiotic.
Okay.
Which is like a beneficial relationship where
Mutually beneficial
relationship where
yeah.
both parties benefit.
Yeah.
I don't know really why they call themselves that. They were a revolutionary group in the 1970s, and I think it's important to understand politically the climate of the times and then where Patricia Hearst was living. She was born in San Francisco, and at this time in the 70s, she was living in Berkeley because she was a student at UC Berkeley, which was always a very, I would say, leftist campus. They always had the most protests. The Vietnam War is still going on at this time. And it's just a kind of a time in the United States history, and certainly California history, where people had this notion of armed revolution. I mean, I think you could all kind of sort of argue that like a contemporary leftist group similar to the SLA would be like the Black Panthers. But the Black Panthers, or the SLA, alienated the Black Panthers because they actually killed the first Black superintendent of the Oakland school systems because they perceived him a fascist due to he had a proposal of wanting mandatory ID cards for students on, I think, the high school campuses.
That's revolutionary. Whoa, let's kill somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
ID
well,
cards.
that's the thing, is that they're armed revolutionaries, and so they think that the only way to bring about revolutionary social change is through armed
murdering people
through armed conflict. So the SLA was formed in 1973, and it was formed between some prison reform activists at UC Berkeley, and an escaped convict. And I'm not even like sure which prison system he escaped from. Somewhere in Northern California, I would imagine somewhere around Berkeley. There was students at UC Berkeley working in the prison systems, trying to do reform. They're kind of swept up in this very leftist, revolutionary view of trying to of social change in the world. Mm-hmm. And so they form a group. Their first major act was killing the black superintendent of the Oakland schools. And then their second major act as the Symbionese Liberation Army was to kidnap the heiress Patricia Hearst from her home. So she's 19 years old. She's a sophomore at UC Berkeley, and she's the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, who is a giant publishing magnate in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Last time I said he was a robber baron, but I don't remember what the definition of a robber baron is. Somebody who gets their money, their wealth and fortune through ill-gotten means, through being basically a tyrant and a jerk.
Yeah, he had something called like penny newspapers, or something like that, penny publications, and he's a large reason like why hemp and marijuana have been illegal for so long, because his newspapers were printed on tree paper, and so like
he had a lot of money in the forestry and paper.
Yeah, so people like him and like DuPont, right. So the Hearst publications, I think, don't they own like Cosmopolitan and Red Book and like all these really major publications, as well as all these newspapers in San Francisco and such. Okay. But she's an heiress. The SLA is aware of this, and that's why they kidnap her. They kidnap her from her home. She's at home with her boyfriend, and they kind of, come in, guns blazing, beat the shit out of her boyfriend, and then take her. So they're aware that, the authorities are aware that she's been kidnapped. I think a couple weeks after the kidnapping, both her parents and the news outlets start receiving what the SLA is calling communique from Patricia Hearst regarding ransom. And what they wanted food donations for anyone, I think, living in poverty in the state of California. And it actually ended up being really unreasonable demand, because it was something like $200 million or $400 million it would have cost to feed people the way that they wanted to. And the Hearst just didn't have that kind of money.
Not anymore anyways.
Yeah, not anymore. I mean, right, when you start getting into 2 or 3 generations from the initial person, and depending how many kids everyone has,
how many descendants.
Money starts to really thin out. So her parents are like kind of start negotiating with the SLA regarding the ransom, and then Hearst herself is kind of feeling like her parents are debating what her worth is in regards to the ransom, and she just, feels in a way that they're trying to protect the Hearst fortune, and they're trying to figure out how much value they're putting on her life, and she kind of feels shitty about that. So 2 months after the kidnapping, Patricia Hearst denounces her family, and then she claims allegiance to the SLA. But really what had happened, and it's really unfortunate that she was ever imprisoned, is that she had developed Stockholm Syndrome when she was kidnapped. She's probably pretty sheltered growing up. I think she went to like all-girls schools. She's an heiress. She really lived a life of privilege. She's just a student at UC Berkeley, lives a normal life, and she's 19 years old. I think if we can all look back and remember what it's like to be 19, and we're still children at that point. And
absolutely.
Someone comes into your house and they kidnap you and put you in the trunk of a car and drive you somewhere. You have no idea where you're going. And then they kind of put her in a closet at their safe house, and they're threatening to kill her all the time. They're depriving her of food. They're depriving her of light. And, it's all this sensory deprivation going on. She eventually starts to get raped, and they're threatening to kill her all the time. And
they probably played up her parents negotiating with them as a way to make her feel more vulnerable. Like, oh, they don't think that you're worth all this.
oh, of course, look at those
Yeah.
those fascist pigs, and all they're concerned about is their money. And what we want is we just want to feed the poor people of the world. And so she does start to feel for, I think, whatever views that they have. So Stockholm Syndrome is where a hostage develops a psychological alliance with their captors. And so 4 things have to be present in order to have Stockholm Syndrome. The hostage develops positive feelings towards their captor. Okay. There's no prior relationship between the hostage and captor. The hostage refuses to cooperate with authorities, and the hostage believes in the humanity of the captor. And
so the difference between like battered wife syndrome and Stockholm syndrome would be the relationship aspect.
Yeah, that there was no prior relationship.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But they're both forms of terrorism.
Correct. Yeah.
Psychological terrorism. And so I think Patty Hearst said at that time that early in the kidnapping, she was locked in a dark closet, had sensory deprivation, was repeatedly raped, abused, and she thought that she would be killed if she didn't participate in whatever they wanted her to participate in. And so her first act as a new, declaring her allegiance to the SLA is they rob a bank. And they find a specific bank to rob because it has surveillance. And I mean, this is just how different 1974 was to our time now, is that they actually had to actively locate a bank that had cameras because that just wasn't standard practice back then.
Wow. Okay.
So,
hard to imagine.
It's really hard to imagine, but it was rare for cameras back then, for banks to have cameras in them. But they do, they're trying to promote their message. And so, there is, all of a sudden they rob this bank, and there's this footage that comes out of Patty Hearst, like wearing a beret and holding like a carbine or whatever, and kind of looking pretty badass, and calling herself a urban guerrilla and taking on the plights of the SLA.
How many months had she been in had they had her since? It's like how many months
between the
her kidnapping and the
so they it was like they kidnapped her in February 4th, and they robbed the bank April 15th. So it had been like 7 weeks.
Okay.
But then after, for the next year and a half after the bank robbery, the SLA was on the run, including Patricia Hearst, and she stuck with the group. She, was given weapons. She stuck with them. She kind of continued on their mission. She didn't try to seek help. She didn't try to run away. She really felt like, she believed in their cause.
I wonder if that's kind of similar, like with kids who run away and end up doing street work and sex work. They don't feel like they can go home because they've gone too far at that point. Like she just really felt like she could fit in back at home because she'd robbed a bank now, and she'd seen all this shit, and she'd been raped and brutalized. Like she just didn't belong in that world anymore. She belonged in this one now.
Well, I mean, I think that she really felt like what they were doing was valid. I mean, I think that it's, unless you've been through some serious trauma, it's hard to kind of explain. Weird things happens to people's brains. And then when when it's something that's sustained, that is going on every day, and then I think, there was an interview with Patricia Hearst later in life, and she said that every day that they don't kill you, you start to feel like they're kind people. And so you start to get confused about what the actual situation is.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's
horrible.
That's what I'm guessing. I mean, that's like what I could only imagine.
Well, the human psyche is very complicated. So,
well, and she's so young, and I always think that like if a Scientologist had gotten a hold of me when I was 19, I'd be a crazy.
Oh, you'd be working on getting up the bridge, man. You'd be climbing the ladder up.
Yep, I'd be like in the Sea Org working on some ship. Like, just it would be insane, because I think at 19 I was pretty impressionable. I mean, I like felt like I was an adult and I didn't know that I wasn't, and I didn't really know much about the world yet, although I thought that I did, and I was really open to kind of like finding myself and who I was, you know, and I think that, I don't know, like at that age and under those conditions, you could almost like feel like it was some sort of divine intervention or something, like this is your life plan, like not realizing that you're really just the victim of some very sick people. After like a year and a half after this bank robbery, Patty Hearst stays with the SLA, and about a year and a half later, most of the SLAs, they make their way down south to Los Angeles, and most of the members are killed in a shootout with the LAPD. I think there's only like one original member left, and Patricia Hearst, and they are both arrested in September of 1975. And when Patty Hearst is arrested, she gives her name as Tanya. She had taken that name after Che Guevara's girlfriend, and she gave her profession as an urban guerrilla.
Wow. Okay.
And so she spends some time in jail, and she's represented at trial by F. Lee Bailey. And
good old F. Lee Bailey.
And what's really unfortunate is that she's, you know, found guilty of these crimes and convicted. But I think in order to be found not guilty due to diminished mental capacity, you have to sort of pass or fail, however they call it, those like psychological tests and IQ tests and all these things. Patty Hearst didn't really do that. So no one had ever gotten off completely based on like a brainwash defense, and neither did Patty Hearst. I mean, I would hope that nowadays, now that we know more about psychological terrorism and mental illness and mental capacities and things like that, that the outcome would be different, or maybe she would be convicted and sent to like a mental institution as opposed to prison. But in 1974, I mean, I think they really did too. Like they wanted to make an example out of her. California Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, this was not the only revolutionary group that they've been dealing with and having nightmares with. I mean, this shit has been going on there forever. And they just sort of like wanted to send someone to jail, and they wanted to make an example out of people, and pretty much Patricia Hearst was like the only living member still of the SLA. Everyone else was dead. Like they had no one else really to convict. So
yeah, she was their scapegoat.
She was. And so it's, you know, it's good that President Carter recognized the situation for what it was and released her from jail, and then Clinton further actually fully pardoned her of all of the crimes. And so that's the story of Patricia Hearst. As an adult, she started acting in some John Waters movies, and I think that's how I first became aware of her.
My mom had told me when I was a kid about Patty Hearst and Stockholm Syndrome, because my mother talked to me like I was an adult even when it was inappropriate. So I had heard about that, and like the Amityville Horror House and all kinds of stuff. So she was on my periphery, I think, from a very early age. And I don't know that I've ever seen her in a John Waters film. Do you know which one she was in?
I know she was in Crybaby.
Okay.
And
so I've definitely seen her
I don't
then.
mean like major roles. I mean, she has like a couple speaking lines. And I know she was in Serial Mom for sure.
Oh, okay.
And she, I think, was maybe in at least one more, I think.
Okay, cool. Do you know what she's doing now?
No.
Okay.
No, you think I would, but I don't know.
That's okay. Hopefully she's living a nice, quiet life, enjoying herself.
Yeah, I mean, I think she is. You know, I've seen a couple interviews with her on Larry King or something, and there's something rather relatable I find about her and endearing. I don't know why. I just like her, how she comes off, her personality, and you can tell that the kidnapping had kind of shaped who she is as a person, you know, and I think
you can't, how could it not have?
She just seems like a really interesting person, you know, and I think that considering everything that happened to her, she handled it really quite well, including doing 2 years in jail.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That'll give you the look of someone who looks like you've seen some shit. She speaks as if, someone who's seen some shit. Like, there just is not a lot of bullshit that comes with her, She comes across as, like, a pretty real person.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Yes. You did a great job for doing it for the third time. Wonderful.
Thank you. Today was, like, the first time I wasn't even nervous. I bet it's because I did it, like, for the third time. I don't know.
Yeah. We kind of had this one on lockdown, I think.
Yeah. I don't know.
Cool. All right. Have you started working on the next one? The Lady Killers?
No, but I just decided today what I'm going to do.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So I'll...
Sweet. I look forward to it.
I am too.
Okay. Great. This has been Demiworld. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Kelly.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
This has been Demiworld. You can follow us on Facebook at Demiworld Podcast and Twitter at DemiworldCast. You can write us at demiworldpodcast@gmail.com. You can find the cast anywhere podcasts live or at our website, demiworld.net. And remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.